Hello Nidorinas and Nidorinos, I'm KingNido, and today it is a matchup between the Olivine Raiders and the Kitakami Rogues. Both these sides are holding the line on the top 5 to trying to make it into victory road. So let's have a look at this tail of the tape, because as we said, both these sides, 5th and 4th respectively, the Olivine Raiders want to return to victory road after being bombed out last season, whereas the Rogues, also only just scraping in last season, want to make it much further in. But with all that said, let us know in the comments below who you think is going to win this matchup. Will it be the metal decks? Will it be the darkness decks? Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go!
And starting off this match, it is the Super Burst Impact deck of the Olivine Raiders, moving their Ferroseed into the active spot. It is the Alolan Rattata from the Potown deck of the Kitakami Rogues in this Game 1, our best of 3 series, where you get 2 points for each game you win. So all 3 games count towards the leaderboard, even that 3rd game, as it is the Professor's Research being played by the Raiders. They get their Alolan Diglett, they also get the Ferrothorn, and they've already got the 2 Alolan Dugtros in hand alongside that Guzma that they just pulled and the leftovers. It is the Alolan Persian being pulled for the Kitakami Rogues. They've got their own Guzma as well as that Poison Barb that they do think of playing, but they clearly notice that Ferroseed does require 2 energy to go on the offensive, as opposed to Rattata, who only needs the 1 to get that 20 damage off the bite. The second Diglett has been pulled for the Raiders as well, and Ferrothorn requires 3 energy for that spinning attack. It is the second Diglett coming online here, and it receives a first energy. Now it cannot evolve on this turn, as we just see Ferrothorn being put into that active spot. One of the 2 Dugtros have come online as well, but it does not have an energy yet, and it does require 2. And it is also the leftovers being put on the Ferrothorn, restoring that 10 health at the end of every turn of the Raiders. It has that Steel Spikes ability, so every time it takes damage from an opposing Pokemon, it does 20 damage back to them as well. It is the Alolan Meowth being pulled by the Rogues, immediately being moved onto the bench as they're looking through their hand, thinking about how to approach this. They do get a first energy onto the Meowth, and Persian does require 2, as they are going to continue with these bites onto Ferrothorn, getting that 20 damage, but as we said, there will be that 20 recoil damage thanks to the Steel Spikes onto the Alolan Rattata. Does come back over to the Raiders. Now both these sides, they want to try and win all 3 games here to maximize those victory points. The second Alolan Dugtrio also comes online here. And they do get that first energy onto the Ferrothorn, continuing to restore its health with those leftovers, but it is the Alolan Eradicate being pulled for the Rogues. They immediately get that online. It still requires 1 more energy for that Scrounge and Scarf that does 50 damage, and they're going to put their own leftovers, it seems, onto the Eradicate. They want to offset some of the damage that they are taking from those Steel Spikes. They're also going to play the Big Malasada, so there will be 10 health being restored for the Alolan Raticate. They can get the Persian online too, but there are 2 various Persians inside this deck, as that Scrounge and Scarf, that 50 damage onto the Ferrothorn here, and it is going to cause that Big Malasada to be discarded from the hand of the Raiders. There's the 20 damage back onto the Raticate, but the leftovers offset that, so it only takes 10 damage really from those Steel Spikes. As the Poison Barb, the Raiders pull their own here. They are going to play their Guzma, or they think about it, but they decide against that here, and they are going to get a first energy onto the second Dugtrio. None of their Pokemon yet have enough energy to go on the offensive. The Dugtrios still require 1 each. The Ferrothorn requires 1 more, but they chose not to put 1 there because it only has 50 health remaining. The Liepard has been pulled for the Rogues, but they haven't got a Purloin in hand or down on the bench just yet. But there is a 3rd energy onto the Raticate. It does have that 3 energy retreat cost. The Scrounge and Scarf once again is going to take Ferrothorn off the board, and the Rogues will take the first battle point in Game 1. The first to 3 battle points does win the game, unless you can take out an active Pokemon with an empty bench, and we've seen that many times in Season A3 of the PokeType League. That health being restored thanks to the leftovers once again of the Raticate, as one of the Dugtrios has been moved into the active spot, getting its 2nd energy as the second Ferroseed was pulled. They're also going to play the Poison Barb as well. They want to try and discourage the Rogues from going on the offensive. This Iron Head, they get to flip coins until they get a Tails. For every heads, it does 70 damage, and there is 1, so at the guaranteed 70, they get 2, so it's 140 damage, wiping the Raticate clean off the board. The infinite power of these Dugtrios is insurmountable, and it can take out any of the Pokemon on the side of this Potown deck with just 2 heads in a row. The second Alolan Raticate has been pulled. They need that Persian online if they want to get seriously on the offensive, as the Scratch from Meowth only does 20 damage. There is also that Fur Coat ability of the Alolan Persian, so it reduces the damage it takes by 20. Keeping in mind that if there are 2 heads flipped from the Iron Head, that will not be enough. They are going to get the Poison Barb onto the Persian as well. They also want to offset, or discourage, the Raiders from going on the offensive, not knowing they too have a Guzma in hand. But there is the 50 damage from the Claw Slash as it comes back over to the Raiders, who do pull a Pokeball. This will guarantee them a basic Pokemon, and it's going to be a Magearna because there's only 2 of them remaining in that deck when it comes to Pokemon cards that are basic, and it is one of the Magearnas, that is pulled, being moved onto the bench. And they are going to play that Guzma, getting that Poison Barb discarded off of the Persian. If they get 2 heads in a row, they will win this game immediately, even though they haven't gotten 3 battle points because of that empty bench. They're going to retreat the Dugtrio that's taking damage, moving in the second Dugtrio here now that it's set up. And they get a Tails immediately, so they're not able to get any damage onto the Persian. This is fantastic for the Rogues. They need another basic Pokemon in hand. Unfortunately though, for the time being, it is the X speed. It does bring down the retreat cost, so they're just going to go with the Claw Slash onto the Dugtrio. 50 damage. Now both sides have only taken 1 battle point so far, as the Raiders pull their own X speed here. And that Magearna does require 2 energy if it wants to go on the offensive. It does receive its second. They've got that Ferroseed. They haven't looked at Spike Sting. Does require 2 energy. The Iron Head though, they're going back for it. They get a Tails on the first one again. This is fantastic for the Rogues. This will free up the Persian to take down the Dugtrio, but they still want a basic Pokemon on the bench, and they get a Purloin. This is fantastic for them, already having the Liepard in hand. The Liepard can do 70 damage for 2 energy, and Purloin does receive its first, as that Claw Slash is going to discard the Dugtrio from the board, and the Rogues with this Potown deck are 1 point away from taking game 1 over the Raiders. Now last season, neither of these sides had a successful series inside of Victory Road. The Rogues being taken out immediately, the Raiders taken out in 2 straight sets, as the Magearna is moved to the active spot. The second Magearna was pulled as well, and the Silver Cannon will do 60 damage. It would have done 80 because it does an additional 40 for the ability of Persian, but fortunately for Persian, that ability reduces the damage it takes by 20. The Alolan Rattata has been pulled thanks to the Pokeball. They are going to get that onto the bench. They move the Liepard online as well, who still requires 1 more energy, but they can retreat the Persian. It has 3 energy on it currently, and that is exactly what they're going to do. Moving the Liepard into the active spot. It does have 90 health, so it can outlast a hit here from the Magearna, getting 70 damage of its own onto Magearna. And it comes back to the Raiders, who pull the Repel. They won't be able to use that at the moment. There's no basic active Pokemon. On the opposing side, it is the Liepard. They are thinking of getting a second energy onto the Alolan Dugtrio, who only has 40 health remaining. It cannot outlast a hit from the Liepard, but they are going for it. They're going to move the Dugtrio into the active spot. They need to get 2 heads in a row. They get 1. They get 2, they get 3, they get 4. Wow, they get 280 damage from the Iron Head onto the Liepard, which is fantastic for the Raiders, but unfortunately that is only their second battle point, which frees up the Rogues. They can move the Alolan Persian back into the active spot. That Claw Slash does 50. They pull the Professor's Research. I don't think they're concerned with the supporter. They are concerned with taking game 1 over the Super Burst Impact deck with their Potown deck in a very impressive fashion. Unfortunately for the Raiders, they could not get those coin flips that they needed, but as we have our first table reset, if you're enjoying what you're seeing, please leave a like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the action in the PokeType League TCG. And for game 2, it will be the Raiders going first with their laser focus deck. They've got the Togedemaru and the Mawile in hand, as well as that Professor's Research, the Aggron and the Lairon. The Mawile in the active spot, Togedemaru on the bench, which is a fantastically fun name to say. The Rogues, they've got their Ultra Genesis deck. They've got the Poipole and the Nihilego, as well as the Absol and the Trubbish. Basic Pokemon galore. They could fill up their whole side of the table. They go with the Trubbish in the active spot, Nihilego on the bench alongside Absol, and they do hold on to the Poipole for now alongside that Leftovers in the hand. But it is game 2. Both sides trying to maximize their victory points to stay inside Victory Road contention. The Leftovers pulled for the Raiders. They play their Professor's Research trying to thin their deck. They get a rare candy and they get the Poison Barb Pokemon tool, and they are immediately going to attach that to the Mawile. They want to discourage the Rogues from going on the offensive with the Trubbish. Trubbish only requires 1 energy. Mawile does require 2, and it's the Naganadel being pulled for the Rogues, who does guarantee that the opposing Pokemon is poisoned when it goes on the offensive. They do get a first energy onto the Trubbish, And they are considering going for the pound, and that is exactly what they do. 20 damage here onto the Mawile. Now, Nihilego as well is a key part of this Alter Genesis deck. If the opposing Pokemon is poisoned, it takes an additional 10 damage, and there are 2 Nihilegos inside this deck. If they're both on the bench, the opposing Pokemon takes an additional 20 from their poisoning as the Klefki is pulled for the Raiders. They do move that onto the bench. And it is the first energy onto the Togedemaru, 10 damage onto the Trubbish thanks to the poisoning, and they do pull their second Nihilego, but they cannot move that onto the bench because it is full here, and then a Ganondorf is going to come online, receiving the 1 energy it requires. They've got the Trubbish in hand. They are going to retreat it, in the active spot. They retreat it back to the bench, curing it of the poisoning. The Ganondorf in the active spot, and with the Electro House, 40 damage onto the Mawile, but the poisoning will do 20 damage. Guarantee that Mawile will be discarded, but Naganadel will also have to contend with its own poisoning. And the Rogues starting off game 2, how they finished off game 1, taking the point here as Togedemaru moves into the active spot, the second rare candy for the Raiders. The Raiders do not want to lose a second game in a row here to the Rogues. Like we said, those victory points are crucial. There's the Bristling Spikes, 30 damage onto the Naganadel, but if the Bristling Spikes set up for Togedemaru to do recoil damage if it takes damage from the opposing Pokemon, as the Garbodor and the Poipole are pulled from the Rogues deck thanks to their Professor's research. And Garbodor does come online. It requires 3 energy. They're having a look at the Togedemaru. Like we said, it does 30 damage back to the attacking Pokemon here. And the Ganondorf is contending with that poisoning as well. If it gets the Electro House off, it will get that poisoning on, and it will do 40 damage. They are going to put the leftovers as well onto Naganadel so it can restore 10 health, try and offset the poison it's contending with. But here it is, the Electro House onto Togedemaru, bringing it down to 40 health, leaving it with that poisoning. But there's the 30 damage back onto the Naganadel. Leftovers, 10 health, poisoning taking off 10 health. But it's Togedemaru who's left with only 20 thanks to the poisoning. The Raiders need to think about how they want to approach this. Do they want to retreat the Togedemaru to keep it on? To keep it from being discarded? Sorry, they can get Klefki into the active spot and it can go on the offensive, as they did just pull their Lairon. They are going to retreat the Klefki. Retreat the Togedemaru, moving the Klefki into the active spot. Now that unlock only does 10 damage, but they know that that will put Naganadel into discard range here. They are able to draw the Sophocles thanks to the unlock, allowing them to draw an additional card, and the Raiders get a point back on the board. For the Rogues, Absol is the only Pokemon that currently has an energy, and it does require 1 more. The Unseen Claw does 20 damage. If the opposing Pokemon has a status condition, it does an additional 60, but unfortunately Klefki does not have a status condition at the moment, as they do pull the Trubbish. They are going to get a first energy onto the Nihilego. They're not concerned with going on the offensive with Absol at the moment. And they do end their turn, sending it back over to the Raiders, who pull their second Togedemaru. We've already seen the power of it with the Sophocles in hand as well. When partnered with the Togedemaru, it allows them to do an additional 30 damage. They are going for another unlock, just chipping away at Absol, thinning their deck ever so slightly as they get their second Sophocles, a crucial supporter card. The Garbodor being pulled for the Rogues. They get their second Nihilego online shortly, though they want the Lucamines out of their deck so they can get energies onto the Nihilegos, as the Nihilego is moved into the active spot, and with that new wave, 30 damage onto the Klefki, but with the poisoning, 30 additional damage as they did retreat the Absol. It is the second Aggron being pulled for the Raiders. Still no Aron in sight, as the Togedemaru, the full health Togedemaru, does receive its second energy. They are going to retreat the Klefki, restoring it from that poisoning. The Togedemaru in the active spot, they've got the Sophocles here. This will boost that Bristling Spikes up to doing 60 damage. As well as that, though, we've seen what that recoil damage does. Nihilego only has 70 health, so now it's got 10 health remaining. If it goes on the offensive, it will be wiped off the board. It is the big Malasada being pulled for the Rogues. It can restore 10 health for a Pokemon who's taken damage, can also cure them of a status condition. Now, having a look at who they may want to attach an energy to, they go with the Absol over that bench Nihilego. Have their options. They can retreat, they can end their turn, they can go with the new wave, which will do 30 damage. But again, there will be that 30 damage back onto the Nihilego from the Togedemaru. And the Rogues, they opt to retreat the Nihilego. They don't want to lose another point here. They're going with the big Malasada to restore 10 health. for the Absol, bring it back up to full strength at 80 health remaining. And it does come back over to the Raiders, who do pull their big Melisada. And they are going to play their second Sophocles here, allowing the Bristling Spikes to do that additional 30 damage, 60 damage to the Absol, which means if Absol now goes on the offensive, it will be discarded from the board. Nobody wants to lose a second point to the opposition here. And it is the Beast Wall being pulled by the Rogues. Unfortunately, that is of no use to them now. It can only be played when the opposing side have not taken a point. They are going to retreat the Absol. They don't want to drop another point. They move the full strength Nihiligo into the active spot, who did just receive its first energy. They know that there's no more Sophocles that can be played by the Raiders, who finally pull their Aron. They are going to get that onto the bench. They've got the rare candies, so they can actually skip the Laron and go straight to the Aggron on their next turn. The Bristling Spikes, 30 damage onto the Nihiligo, and those Bristling Spikes have been set up to do that recoil damage. The Beast Knight pulled for the Rogues here, that when attached to an Ultra Beast, it does allow them to do an additional 10 damage for every point they've taken. They can put this on the Nihiligo if they so choose. That would allow the Nihiligo to do 40 damage, but instead they're just going for the new wave, so it does do 30 damage to the Togedemaru. It is going to leave it with the poison, 30 damage back onto the Nihiligo, and that 30 damage onto the Togedemaru here. A much more methodical paced game from these two sides, and we have seen the Kitakami Rogues go the full 30 turns to a tie this season. It's the first time we've seen that in the PokeType League TCG, as we are in our Season A3 at the moment. And they do play the rare candy to get that Aggron online. Do the Raiders with their laser focus deck, another Bristling Spikes, and it will be another point on the board for the Raiders, discarding the Nihiligo from the board. The Bristling Spikes are set up once again. The Rogues need to think about how they want to approach this next turn. Now, if they do lose the Absol or the Nihiligo, they will lose the game. They do move the Nihiligo into the active spot, but the poisoning as well has taken down the Togedemaru. So we are down to a 1 point game. The next point will take game 2. The Rogues trying to lock up this series. The Raiders want to make that game 3. The decider, the Pokeball, is pulled for the Rogues. They are going to play that immediately to see if they've got any more basic Pokemon, and they do get their second Absol. They've got that Beast Knight in hand that we did touch on. It can be attached to an Ultra Beast, and they've taken 2 points now, so it will allow that new wave to do 50 damage in total. The Nihiligo getting its second energy, only 10 health remaining, but Aggron still requires 2 more energy. Rogues having a quick check through their hand, potentially to see what they have, and they do go with that new wave onto the Aggron. 50 damage, the poisoning coming into play, it will do an additional 20. Aggron still has 90 health remaining. This is great for the Raiders here. And they do have that big Melisada if they want to use that. That can cure Aggron of that poisoning to offset 20 of that damage. As well as that though, it will also heal 10 health for Aggron. It is cured of the poisoning. That's where it offsets that 20 damage. And they are going to get the leftovers onto it as well to ensure that it will restore an additional 10 health. They are 1 turn away from being able to set up this Giga Impact that does 150 damage. The second Naganadel has been pulled for the Rogues. Their options are limited. Aggron still has 110 health remaining. None of their Pokemon can do enough damage to get it off the board. They get an energy onto the Absol. They move the Poipole onto the bench. I think they're trying to think of options, but they know deep down they go with the new wave. Another 50 damage onto the Aggron. The poisoning coming into play, bringing Aggron down to 40 health. But Aggron is going to get that 4th energy here, and it can go with the Giga Impact, and it can only use this 1 turn, and it only needs it for 1 turn to get that 150 damage. And the Raiders, with their laser focus deck, will take the 3rd point here in game 2 and take down the Alter Genesis deck, as we have our final table reset going into game 3. And with our game 3 decider, both sides want those extra 2 victory points, as the Raiders once again will be going first, this time with their Ultra Wormhole deck. We can see that they've got the 2 Meltans in hand. They've already got the Melmetal plus the Poison Barb and the leftovers. For the Rogues, it is that Sandile in hand. They've got the Crocodile and the Rare Candy already in hand, as well as the leftovers and the Professor's Research. That has been crucial throughout every Season A so far of the PokeType League TCG. And speaking of the crucialness of the Professor's Research, the Raiders pull their own using their Ultra Wormhole deck. They get the Beast Wall, they get their Necrozma in hand, immediately getting that onto the bench. They're going to get that not the leftovers, the Poison Barb onto the Meltan. They want to discourage the Rogues from going on the offensive with this Skull and Bone deck as they pull their second Crocodile. They can't go for the evolution just yet. They have to wait until their own second turn as they play their Professor's Research, and they get both Sableyes in hand, moving them one of them and then the second one onto the bench. I called that one quickly, as the Sandile is going to go for the bite. They're not worried about that poisoning coming into play, getting that 20 damage onto the Meltan. There will be 20 damage by the time it gets back to the Sandile as well. The Stack Attacker has been pulled for the Raiders. They can go on the offensive here with Meltan. It can do 20 damage to the Sandile. If they get Melmetal online, it still requires 2 more energy, but they're going for the Headbutt on the Sandile, bringing it down to 40 health. They're hoping that that poisoning will chip away and that they can't get a Crocodile online. The Lily has been pulled, who can restore up to 60 health from a stage 2 Pokemon, which is exactly what Crocodile is. The leftovers have been attached to Sandile to try and offset a bit of that poison damage as well, and they are going to play the rare candy here. They are willing to get the Crocodile online. This will cure Sandile of the poisoning, but they will not be able to go on the offensive. They do get a second energy onto Crocodile. Those Poaching Fangs doing 90 damage for 3 energy, but not just that, they do allow them to flip 3 coins, and for every head, a random card from the hand of the Raiders does go back into their deck. The second Necrozma being pulled, and Melmetal is moved onto the benched Meltan here. Are going to get a first energy onto that Melmetal as the headbutts continue from the Meltan. 20 more damage onto Crocodile, who will be set up in the coming turn. You have to imagine only requiring 1 more energy. It's the Poison Bar being pulled for the Rogues. It cannot be attached to the Crocodile because it's already got the leftovers. It's 1 Pokemon tool per Pokemon. The Lily, though, is being played to restore 50 health from the Crocodile, taking it back up to 140. And with the Poaching Fangs, it will be 90 damage. Discarding Meltan from the board, but they get those 3 coin flips. They get 1. They get they get 2 here. So they miss out on the second one, but they still get 2 cards put back into the deck of the Raiders here, the leftovers and that Beast Wall, which is not going to be any use to the Raiders now because that can only be played when the opposing side haven't taken any points. They are going to move the Melmetal though into the active spot, who still requires 2 more energy. They do pull the Pokeball. This will allow them to get a basic Pokemon from their deck, thinning it a little bit, and they get their second Stack Attacker, as that was the last remaining basic Pokemon they have. All basic Pokemon are out of their deck. There's only a Melmetal in there, and that is no good to them now. They get the second Necrozma onto the bench, as well as the Stack Attacker. It comes back over to the Rogues, who are contending with that poisoning. They do pull the Toxapex, but no Marini in handle on the table, as it is the Sableye receiving a first energy. Another Poaching Fangs, 90 damage onto the Melmetal, bringing it down to 50 health. But it is those coin flips coming into play. They get a Tails, they get a Heads, they get 1 Heads. It's that middle coin that is different to the others. Once again, that 1 Stack Attacker going back into the deck of the Raiders. They have an empty hand at the moment, as that poisoning and the leftovers doing a bit of offset for each other. Another Pokeball being pulled for the Raiders. This means that Stack Attacker will be coming back into their hand, but they do have to contend with that Poaching Fangs, as it is the Mega Punch that is set up for the Melmetal. 90 damage onto the Crocodile, bringing it down to only 30 health remaining. That poisoning bringing it down to 20. The Rogues are going to pull their second Sandile. They've already got that second Crocodile in hand, but no Crocorock or Rare Candy in sight at the moment, as the Poaching Fangs will continue trying to get that Stack Attacker back into the deck. But not just that, Melmetal will be discarded. The Rogues will be 1 point away from locking up Game 3 and this series. And again, it is just a single Heads that they are able to flip, but that is all they need, as they are 1 point away from taking Game 3. The Raiders with this Ultra Wormhole deck are yet to take a point. The Skull and Bone deck being set up so quickly. It is the Necrozma being moved into the active spot, but they do need to pull a Lucamine if they want to quickly get 2 energy onto the Necrozma. It is the Guzma instead being pulled. That Black Metal does require 3 energy. They are going to play the Guzma though. This will get that leftovers discarded from the Crocodile. And they do get the first energy onto the Necrozma. There is not much else the Raiders can do at the moment. Crocodile has 10 health remaining. They do pull the Marini. They've already got a Toxapex in hand, but their bench is full. And the Rogues are going to get a second energy onto the Sandile. Both Sableye and the Toxapex line only require a single energy, as another Poaching Fangs. The Necrozma being brought down to only 20 health remaining. They have another chance to go for those coin flips, but there is nothing in the hand of the Raiders at the moment. This is all for fun, and they do get 2 out of 3 this time. But the poisoning will get Crocodile discarded from the board. is the Sableye with its lone energy being moved onto the active spot, and the Lusamine is pulled for the Raiders. This will allow them to get 2 energy taken from their discard pile to be placed onto the Necrozma here. They are going to get an energy onto the bench Necrozma. They didn't set up the bench Necrozma instead to potentially keep a stronger Pokemon online. Instead, they do get that that Sableye discarded from the board, but they have left their weakened Necrozma in the active spot. They move their second Sableye into the active spot as the Krokorok is pulled for the Rogues. Krokorok can do 40 damage, Sableye can do 30. It's actually a stronger Pokemon, and the damage does count towards the leaderboard. The Necrozma on the bench should have been moved, or could have been moved to the active spot for the Raiders, but they went against it, and this frees up the Krokorok now in the active spot to allow that Light Punch to take down Necrozma, and overall the Skull and Bone deck will take down this Ultra Wormhole deck, allowing the Raiders to take this series, as we only have one more game for each of these sides before we hit Victory Road. The Rogues moving up to 2nd place, and next round they are going up against the Opelucid Frontiers, whereas for the Raiders still in 5th, next round are going up against the Petalburg Razors. But until then, Nidorinos, thank you so much for watching. Let us know in the comments below what cards you pulled today, and if you enjoyed what you saw, please leave a like, hype, subscribe, but more importantly, always remember, send thanks, and I'll see you when you see me.